Are you tired of the same old conversations? Do you often find yourself struggling to know what to say? Are you over discussing the news, sports ball, or the weather? It's time to put boring discussions behind you by leaving a copy of The Nephilim Look Like Clowns on your coffee table, your toilet, your local library, mother's car, boss's office desk, or that person you really likes bed instead.
What the hell is this?
Oh, that? Why, it's just a book about how the modern costume of a clown is a caricature of ancient giants and modern demons.
Stay away from my children.
This is a conversation you can't wait to have.
My family used to think I was crazy, but thanks to the Nephilim Look Like Clowns, they know I'm crazy.
The Nephilim looks like clowns. It's no laughing matter.
I want you to get together.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to welcome another man today with a very manly name. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's one of them names over the years where it's sort of a particular age range of people. Now you look younger than the particular age range of the name Paul.
Yeah. I'm 32, and the story of why I'm called Paul is I was born and my mum had a baby book, and it's pretty much the first name she came to. So there you go. That's why I'm called Paul.
Well, yeah, because for me, I'm quite a bit older than you. I mean, I'm like born in 1979, so it's a common name for sort of that generation. And the amount of people I've worked with over the years called Paul is unbelievable.
Well,
I've
been told I act like a 50-year-old man, even when I was 10 years old. So maybe it's a name befitting my personality. Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously people know you call Paul, but tell us a little bit about your background. Like I was talking to you a little bit off air. I definitely know I've got listeners who know who you are because like I said, a couple of them recommended you as a guest to be on this show. So, but for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself, like your background, and then what led you to be doing the things that you're doing now.
Sure. So I grew up in the northwest of England, and I think, judging by your accent, somewhere in the north, you too as well. I'm not sure, is that Yorkshire with the hint of Lancashire? You're somewhere in the Midlands there?
It's Lancashire, but Lancashire. I now live in North Wales.
Oh, interesting. Oh, there we go. So yeah, we're not actually that far away from each other, So I had a relatively similar upbringing to yourself, probably, living in a wet, grey, miserable, beautiful part of the UK. So, but no, I grew up in a relatively working class family. Dad's a factory worker, mum worked with the disabled kids and became a librarian, and I basically became an artist. That's what I do by degree. That's what I do. That's all I've ever done my entire life is be creative. I went to Lincoln University and got my art degree in 2014 is when I graduated. But in that build-up time, that period, I was a bit of a rebellious stereotype of an artist. I was taking drugs and smoking weed every day, drinking wine, doing all the usual stereotypical stuff a teenage rebellious artist, youngest child does. And during that time, I was always one looking for answers. I was always one who questioned the narrative. I've always kind of been a little bit suspicious of leadership, and it's kind of in my nature to be a conspiracy theorist. Let's put it that way. I've always been that way, and I kind of went on a journey of spiritual self-discovery throughout those formative years of my life, and I was looking for answers in the psychedelic realm. I was experimenting with DMT, LSD, salvia, mushrooms, whatever I could get my hands on, basically, as I was doing those things. But I wasn't doing it in like a hippie, airy-fairy, crystal power sense, I was very much scientifically trying to deduce the experiences, and I made journals. I'm actually holding one of them right now from years ago. I've got a few pages left to make some notes while I'm talking to you, but I was always trying to kind of figure things out, spiritually speaking. I was looking for answers. Yeah. And I was looking primarily in the East. I was looking for that spiritualism of what it means to have consciousness and all that kind of stuff. And, Christianity for me was never really on the cards. I outright rejected that growing up. Didn't make any sense to me. I had no no way of understanding it in any way, shape, or form. It just didn't relate to me. And my grandma was raised a Catholic, and I went to church with her a couple of times when I was young. But an old lady died in front of me in church. She was very old and frail, collapsed and hit her head on the pew. The typical wooden banisters at the end of these churches, you know, and it didn't go well for her, unfortunately, you know. So I think that left a bit of a taint in my mouth about the idea of God, you know, from a very young age, and I think it probably never left me. And maybe in hindsight, it's one of those things that kind of pushed me to look elsewhere for answers, spiritually speaking. But I looked for it in the psychedelic realm, and I suppose in a way that kind of became my community in a sense. Those people. But at the same time, when I started university, I was kind of also discovering for the first time the whole conspiracy culture online. And 2012 was a bit of a golden age for conspiracy online. It was there was a lot of voices around at that time, a lot of end times voices out there, the Illuminati symbolism in movies type voices, and it was also when the end of the world was supposed to happen in 2012, at the end of the Mayan calendar, you know. So I was watching all this stuff, starting university on this weird psychedelic journey, and I just had to know, what are these people seeing and listening to that's making them think the world's going to end? Like, what is this? You know, I was fascinated. And I made it the subject matter of my artwork for the next 3 years while getting my degree in Lincoln. It became about understanding conspiracy theories and what this is all about. And in a sense, you know, that's when I started to dabble with or learn about the biblical perspective and biblical history, and the Nephilim being one of those things, you know, and the Book of Enoch and these extra biblical texts and these understandings of Genesis 6 and also the flood and the reasonings behind the flood. And then obviously the conspiracy of satanic people quite practically ruling the world, and why would they believe in the devil if he wasn't real? All these questions were starting to go swirl around in my mind. And on that journey, you know, and I would say in 2014, after finding no answers in the psychedelic community to answer the meaning of purpose of life and why we're here in creation, I was listening to a lot of spiritual warfare type pastors, people like Derek Prince. And I think I was starting to understand a little bit about what the truth was, that God is real and he sent his son to die for us, and we need to take that seriously, because that is pretty much why we have a conspiracy today. It all points back to him. And that was the thing, on my journey originally, I thought I could answer all the conspiracy questions through psychology or some kind of archetypical symbolic breakdown of these things that were happening, or, you know, understanding the occult enough to use it for good or something like that. But I kept hitting this wall of, nope, it's all about Jesus and you need to get right with him. You just kept coming back to that over and over again. And I didn't want to accept that. It took a long time, but in 2014, at the end of my degree, I was kind of lost, directionless, burnt out from all these experiences with drugs, you know, and dabbling with occult ideologies and things like that. And I was getting no answers. My life was getting significantly, tangibly worse following these ideas, you know, and I broke down with not knowing where I was going next or what my future was going to be. My degree was over, you know, and I had this YouTube channel, and I just didn't know what to do with myself or my life. And I suppose I'd kind of hit rock bottom in terms of purposelessness, meaninglessness, rejection, nihilism, hedonism, all these type of things. And I just said, okay, God, so if you are real, help me. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what's coming next. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. And at this time, I was actually in Newcastle, funnily enough, on a stag do for my brother-in-law, my now brother-in-law, you know, who's going to marry my sister. And I was at this hotel, and after a night of typical lads, you know, stag do stuff, which I'm probably not going to go into the details of, this is when I had this moment where, you know, I was just there and I ran myself a bath. And that seems pretty insignificant to anybody listening, but I'd only ever lived in a house with a shower cubicle for like 15 years. I hadn't had a bath in like a long time, you know, like a very long time. So to me, this meant a lot to have the opportunity to run a bath. You know, I was like, I'm taking this opportunity. And after asking that God to help me in that moment and not really knowing what was coming next, I had a bath. I put my head under the water, and I think I accidentally baptized myself because I had some kind of massive rush of energy run through my chest. I thought I was having a panic attack of some kind. I leaped out of the bath, ran to the mirror and calmed down, but I wasn't in pain, you know, it wasn't anything significant in the moment, but it stuck with me. And you know, from that day, everything was different. I've been sober since then. I don't touch any drugs. I don't even drink. I've slowly. It took a long time, but I did beat my nicotine addiction. That took 10 years. I've knocked that on the head 2 years ago. I stopped smoking cannabis in 2016, so 2 years after that day, I did taper it down, and I haven't touched it since. I haven't touched a psychedelic since or anything higher than that. And caffeine is probably my only vice. I still kind of need to work on, but I became a different person that day, and I don't recognize the person I was. What I wanted was no longer interesting to me. The desires I used to have were gone. All I cared about was the truth from that day and pursuing those things. And I've been on a journey since then, and of self-improvement, shall we say. And you know, I became a leader and manager of people in a supermarket. I was accused of all sorts of horrible things along the way. I was assaulted by the public during that event, you know, that happened, and one thing led to another, and I was kind of forced to come off of YouTube after a short while, after starting this series about spiritual warfare, which we might be able to discuss briefly soon. But I had to take a 5-year break in 2018 because my workplace found my YouTube channel and threatened to demote me from a managerial position if I was to have this channel, because the stuff I talk about is too controversial, and we are a multicultural, diverse company, you know. So if any of the staff find your channel, you're in trouble, and we're not going to be able to help you. So in a moment of weakness I'm not happy with, I capitulated and stayed quiet for 5 years, just got on with my job. But in that time, I think God taught me a lot of things: how to deal with people, how to run a small team, how people think, dealing with the public, you know. And I think it gave me a set of skills which are very useful today as a public speaker online now. 2 years ago, I did quit that job. I came back full time onto YouTube. I started a photography company with my wife, which went under after a year, but it kept me going long enough to build this platform I have now. And I've published a book since then on spiritual warfare, and I have a huge following now, about 60,000 subscribers on YouTube as of today. And I have a community which is quite solid, and it is a firmly Christian community, trying to explain the conspiracy and understand the conspiracy from that perspective. So I'm primarily known today as somebody who began the theory and still goes on with the theory today that the Nephilim look like clowns. And I know it sounds a bit crazy on the surface. Immediately, I know what it sounds like. I'm not a nut, you know. But really, if I was to explain what that was, it's a anthropological study of ancestor spirit cultures all around the earth who dress in a specific way during their rituals to evoke the ancestors and to channel the spirits. I notice a common pattern and thread between all these cultures spread out through the earth, that they all dress the same way, and they all have a very similar aesthetic to the way they choose to represent their ancestors in the spirit realm. And these are features we would consider clownish today in the West. It's also a study into the history of the clown and how secret societies and Freemasons have been there intimately since its inception and its creation, and how the Western costume of a clown is in fact a purposefully crafted symbol used by secret societies for the same purpose as these ancestor spirit worship cultures all over the earth. They dress like the thing, to channel the thing, and they're in communication with the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which looked like clowns when they were in physical form, and they look like jesters in the spiritual realm now, here on Earth, which people on DMT encounter quite frequently. And so I've written the book on that. I don't know if your viewers will see this, but this is it. You can get it on Amazon, and that's just been published recently. I have a whole series dedicated to that on YouTube, which is a bit of a side note to what we're going to talk about today, because I've also split focus massively on my channel by accident, and I have in some way, shape or form become a leadership voice in the subject of the millennial reign, and that it may have already happened. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's pretty much my journey summarized there as quickly and as succinctly as I can in about 15 minutes. But there's a lot of things in between that happened, but that's the best I can do for you to keep it quick.
No, that's great. I mean, it's great to hear when people tell you how they've changed, and a lot of Christians, you know, they struggle with assurance. And I've been a Christian since 2001, and I've had my backslidings and all these types of things. But one of the things that I picked up on what you said there, which is a great sign of someone who's been saved, is you said that your desires changed, and the things that you used to be interested in no longer interested you.
Mhm.
And that's a great sign, for people who struggle. So that's just a sort of side note for anyone who's worried about their salvation. If you have been changed like that, I can assure you that's a good sign. But like you said, we're going to talk about, well, obviously the millennium's going to come up, but I'm just going to read the short passage, because the theory that we're going to talk about today is referred to as Satan's little season, and obviously this is sort of mentioned in Revelation chapter 20. And I'll just read the first 3 verses, and it says, "And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season." So that obviously it's called Satan's little season or short season. Could you elaborate on what this theory is all about?
Mhm. Okay, so this is a very complicated concept, and it's not easy for most people to, especially Christians, to hear. They don't want to hear this. So brace yourself is what I'm going to say first of all, but also understand that what I'm saying here, I'm not saying I have all the answers or everything ironed out perfectly. What I do on my channel is I take a topic, a theory, and I try to understand it thoroughly. So what you're hearing is me so far as much as I understand this new theory that's come about, and I'm relaying you to the information that's available out there about this. Okay, I do think there's a lot to this. I think this has a lot of weight behind it. People would say it's bad hermeneutics and bad interpretation of the text. I would say no, you just don't like it. It's not that it's bad. It's just a different way of interpreting it. But for some of your listeners out there who may already be in a futurist mindset or a dispensationalist mindset that everything's yet to come in the future and the millennial kingdom is still yet to happen, this is going to be a complete inversion of that belief system, and this is going to be something else. So that's a bit of a baseline, first of all. Now, this basically comes from... It's not a new idea. It's formally known as something similar to, let's call it preterism, which was developed in about the 1600s by a Jesuit priest. It's quite well known. But this isn't preterism classically so called. Preterist worldview tends to be that the millennial kingdom is a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual concept, and it's not really like a physical reign on earth necessarily. And then you have partial preterists who still believe there's some things yet to be fulfilled, but most of Revelation was fulfilled in 70 AD. And that's what full preterism thinks we're in the new heaven and earth already. This is kind of neither of those things. This is a worldview in which we're saying most prophecy has been fulfilled except the final judgment at the end of time, and the new heaven and earth has not yet come. But what we're saying is the reign of Christ was a very physical thing on earth. It wasn't just a simply spiritual thing that trickled down onto the people up on high as he sat next to the Father on the throne in heaven, And we're saying there was some physical aspect or a reflection of that on earth, which we can see the remnants of today. And we're kind of squatting in the remains of this once prosperous, beautiful earth, which existed for, let's say, 1,000 years, a millennium. So that's kind of the basis for it. So people would say you're just a preterist. I would say this is something else. And we don't believe this based on some formalized counter-reformation to the reformation of Protestantism from the Catholic Church in the 1600s. That's not what we're basing this belief on. We're basing this understanding from the words of Jesus himself. So we'll kind of get into that as we go along. But fundamentally, this has cropped up online recently due to the Tartarian theory that's been knocking about. So this is the idea that there is a large, all-encompassing on the earth civilization of super advanced people with super advanced technology, incorporating ether from the atmosphere, using antennas and domes within buildings to harness energy, to then use that free energy to power the entire earth and give people healing properties and kind of elongate life and height and all sorts of things. It's kind of a golden age of humanity that existed in our past, and it's been hidden and buried from us due to an enormous reset event that happened, which people call the mud flood, which kind of buried a lot of these buildings slightly under like a few feet of mud. Now, the weird thing is, there's actually a lot of evidence to say that yes, something like this does seem to have happened, and some part of our history seems to have been hidden from us. There clearly was some kind of advanced civilization that built things in a way we just don't build them today. And we're kind of all told these beautiful Gothic cathedrals from the Middle Ages were built by people with horse and buggy and just a lot of manpower. It's kind of, no. When you actually look into the details, they did not build these things. No chance. We couldn't even build them properly today. And when we do require extremely powerful tools, weight dispersion, cranes, things that these people just would not have had the ability to couldn't have done this. So there's holes in the history, so-called mainstream narrative that we have. And the Tartarian researchers, which aren't really a Christian group of people, they're really not. They're kind of more of a the evil controllers, and they're like the good occultists versus the bad occultist type people. Generally speaking, that tends to be the main culture of the Tartarian researchers. But it's a broad umbrella with many people with many belief systems underneath it. Now, me as a Christian, this just didn't make sense. Like, there's evidence that this existed, but this is certainly not the Christian narrative as we know it. This is not biblical history as we understand it. This is something else, So we kind of needed an answer as Christians to explain this, and there was a video created, I think it was about 2019-20, by a channel called Exploring Tartaria. She was one of the Christian researchers within this world who had been noticing a few things. And I think she had a predominantly Catholic background, or was at least flirting with the idea of Catholicism in light of this new theory. And she basically made a very brilliant presentation, which she's actually removed today. So maybe she's withdrawn her view on this today. I don't know. She's still on Instagram, I believe, but her videos have kind of been taken down and hidden. But she made a fantastic presentation explaining, for the first time very clearly to me, that Tartarian Empire may have been the millennial reign of Christ, and it's been hidden from us. And in a sense, the Tartarian truth topic is kind of like the controllers getting ahead of it first to explain it away, so we don't get onto the truth of the fact that Christ quite physically reigned on earth for 1,000 years with his resurrected saints. And during that 1,000 years of peace, where the Satan was locked, bound in chains, humanity was kind of free in a way they never have been before. We're no longer the devil whispering in their ear, turning them against each other. And in those 1,000 years without the devil around, people had a chance to actually build something beautiful, something prosperous. And with it being that Christ was also ruling over them as a literal king during that time too, with resurrected saints who got to take part in the first resurrection, as mentioned in Revelation 20. It seems like there was some kind of kingdom set up, which was incredible, beyond our understanding. And the whole earth was built out during this 1,000-year period. And people today say it's the Tartarian Empire, but what it seems that we may be looking at, quite possibly, is the millennial reign of Christ. And when that ended, and it does end, it says in Revelations 20, when the 1,000 years has ended, Satan's let loose for a little season to deceive all the nations and gather an army, the number of the sands of the sea, Gog and Magog from the four corners of the earth, to surround and make war with the camp of saints. Now that's a lot of words there, isn't it? And you hear these things, and you don't really have any context to understand that much. We can make assumptions based on the Old Testament and the previous mentions of Mount Zion and, like Zechariah and Isaiah and all these type of things. But it's kind of, we don't know what that looks like, because we're always viewing it through a lens that is still yet to come in the future, these type of ideas. Now, technically, yeah, that is still yet to come in the future, but people aren't even looking for it. They're not really thinking about Gog and Magog in today's world, because we're still looking for the signs of tribulation. We're still waiting for 7 years of utter destruction on the earth and for Christ to return to establish his millennial reign. Now, if this theory is true, we are incredibly deceived about where we are in the timeline. Like, we are in trouble, because whatever does come next, we're being deceived about that situation. So that's the theory summarized very quickly there. There's so much minutiae, which I'm sure you want to get into. I'm sure you have questions, and I'm sure you also think, and we'll try and discuss each topic as they come along. But fundamentally, that's the idea. And it's not just Exploring Tartaria, by the way, who mentioned this. She was kind of one of the first people to kickstart the imagination of people to think about this. There's been a lot of channels talking about this over the years, but it's kind of remained on the fringe for a while. I kind of picked the topic up in October last year. And my first video was like, okay, so if this idea is true, who are we then to live during this time? And I was just speculating, are we the rest of the dead, which is said aren't resurrected till the 1,000 years are over? Could that be us? And then people get upset because we're going into kind of like reincarnation territory or something like that. But I'm saying, well, the Bible is a book about resurrecting the dead. It's not out of bounds for the dead to be resurrected again, so it's possible. But it was just a speculative video. I wasn't saying anything was final on that, but that seemed to spark people's imagination. It's like they never even considered the concept before, and I've kind of rolled with it a little bit, and more questions came my way, more people got involved, there was other big names in it, and I've kind of been getting these other channels on my channel to share their angle and their take, and we're not a monolith. Everyone has their own kind of like way it should be interpreted or way we can make sense of it, you know, and we're all kind of loosely on the same line, but other people just have their own idea about, well, how long's a little season, or how was the timeline actually manipulated? Have they removed 1,000 years, or is the history as we know it true? Is a little season really just 250 years or 1,000 years, or is it only like a few years? Some people think it started in the year 2000. Some people say it started in 1776 with Independence Day, getting free from the old kingdom and establishing the new. And people have all these, and I'm trying to get people to come on to share their narrative and their theories and ideas. Maybe we can create more of a holistic image. But I'm not telling you right now I've got it all figured out. What I'm saying is, when you really start to contemplate this idea, it starts to make sense of a lot of the conspiracy. It really does start to make sense about where we are and who we are and what the controller's agenda actually is during this time. So there we go. I'll stop there. I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into the Tartaria thing. I've got a book on that, and what is clear is that we've been lied to about history. That's just absolutely clear.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, there's these fantastic architecture all over the world, so all very similar types of buildings. We know that. You don't need to go that far. You can look around your own towns and cities and find buildings that seem to be out of place. So that's a fact. I mean, they're there. We can't argue with that. These buildings, they're out of place. There's the pyramids. There's all kinds of things. So there's a lot of things that don't make sense. For me, my problem is this: I don't believe the millennium's a literal reign on earth. And the reason why is because people talk about the millennium and they talk about this literal reign on earth, but what they're doing is they're taking a Revelation, which is a highly symbolic book, and they're literalizing that 1,000 years, when actually that doesn't fit with the rest of Scripture, i.e. Matthew chapter 24, Luke chapter 21. It just doesn't fit in, and it would require a third sort of coming of Christ. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that there's clearly going to be Satan's little season, and we may be in it, because I'm not discounting that at all. When you look at it, that's clear. He's going to have this little season. But my initial problem straight away was like, well, I mean, so a question about it then, in your opinion, right? Is the millennium a physical millennium? Is that a key to this little season theory? Or would you say that, well, no, you could not have a physical reign and there could still be the little season?
Yes, so it's a little bit of everything, to be honest. It could go down in many ways, and I don't know, and still trying to figure it out. And again, the opinion is split on how this works. So it's in Matthew 24, when he's saying things like, this generation won't pass away until these things have come to pass. People have often equated this generation to mean that generation in the distant future, and people think they're talking about us now. I would say no, he was talking about the people right in front of him. That generation wouldn't pass away before he came back with his kingdom in the clouds, And when he was talking to Caiaphas, the Pharisee, and he was saying, you will see me come back with the kingdom in my clouds, you right there. In Revelation, when it says things like, those who pierced him will see him return in the kingdom with his clouds. And this is what a lot of preterists base their arguments on, that, well, he said, this temple will be destroyed, not one stone will be left on top of the other, but mark my words. And it's kind of, well, that destruction of that temple did happen in 70 AD by the Romans, and you have Roman historians like Flavius Josephus who documented the destruction of the temple, and he describes in a very strange manner, and he even says people wouldn't even believe it unless they were there to witness it themselves, but people saw chariots of fire and armies in the sky raining destruction down on the temple, you know, and it's kind of, well, that sounds like Jesus's return, you know, and a lot of people have kind of said, well, Jesus wasn't a liar. He meant what he meant when he said he was coming back quickly, and when he told John in Patmos to not seal up the scrolls and go and tell everybody what I'm about to tell you. The time is now. When John's saying your brother in tribulation, you know, now people would have to stretch somehow that John is still alive today, 2,000 years later, to make that make sense, you know. And what I'm saying is, if you can just humor the idea, things will start to click into place. Now, whether that means when Christ returned, he was walking around like a king with a crown on a horse, visiting all the countries, that's up for debate. Some people would say yes, some would say no. Some would say he only ruled from Mount Zion, New Jerusalem, the heavenly kingdom descended to earth. And people had to go see him, you know, make pilgrimages to him, as in Zechariah, when it was talking about this time. It was saying, you know, Egypt would have to make the pilgrimages and take part in the Feast of Tabernacles. If they didn't, they would suffer drought, you know, and they would have no rain. There'd be consequences for not taking part during this rain, this time, you know. So all that kind of language makes you think, well, maybe it was physical. When it says he rules with a rod of iron, iron is a pretty physical, dense object. You know, I think it's a hint that this is going to be a physical kingdom manifest on earth in some way, shape, or form. But a lot of people have also argued, no. He was ruling from heaven. And for those 1,000 years while the devil was bound, whatever, a literal 1,000 years or just a long period of time, whichever way you want to interpret that, while those people were no longer suffering under the devil and his vices and his desires to manipulate people, and while Christ was reigning from heaven, that heavenly influence did come down, and people did start to build beautiful things, make beautiful artworks, be more inspired to care for the earth and to make it a place worth living. We're no longer fighting or killing each other because they had no need for that, because that's the stuff the devil encourages people to do. Kingdoms against kingdoms, brother against brother, you know, father against son, that type of thing. None of that was really happening, and it doesn't say it was a perfect time. There were still small skirmishes and petty squabbles during this time, and it wasn't 100% peace, but in comparison to most of human history, especially the 20th century, it was practically heaven on earth. So you could say it was a spiritual reign that had physical impact on people, or you could say it might quite literally have been that Jesus was there on a throne and people can go and see him if they wanted to. And his resurrected saints who took part in the first resurrection, they were also kind of emissaries for him on the earth, who took over geographical locations. Maybe their dwelling was the cathedral in the local city, and people can go and see the saint, you know, to intercede on them on behalf of Christ, or maybe the saint was overlooking that area. And this is the kind of speculation we start to get into, to try and make sense of just these glorious buildings everywhere that don't fit into history like they tell us. Like, who had time to build these things when we're told the Middle Ages was nothing but misery, a slowdown of creativity and non-stop war between feudal countries and battles. You know, it was a terrible time to be alive. Everyone was sick and dying all the time, yet they're building these beautiful things, these monuments that have lasted almost 1,000 years, if not longer, and stood the test of time. But today we can barely build a new build property that doesn't decay and fall apart within 50 years. You know, it's kind of, the things don't make sense until you start thinking about it from this point of view. And as Christians, I'm not willing to take the Tartarians' answer, you know, that there was this odd advanced civilization that was in tune with the earth that has nothing to do with God's input. You know, I think if we want to explain this as Christians, because it's clearly evidence that this did happen, we need answers, and the millennial reign gives us answers for the Tartarian question from a biblical perspective. But again, I'm not going to be able to give you a perfect timeline. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly when it began. I'm not being able to fully explain away the church fathers. I'm not, but there's clearly something wrong. Something's up with our story, and it's kind of, can we even? I know you use words like heresy and things like this, but on this is the language of the church you're talking about here, and there comes a point where you have to listen to the words of Jesus, and you're going to make a choice. Really, am I going to say he's the truth and every other man is a liar? Or am I going to look for outside words and sources from other men who came after him and take their word for it instead? you do have to start getting a little bit introspective with your faith from this, and it is a faith shaker. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying this is an easy pill to swallow. It took me like 4 years of just thinking about it before I openly decided to publicly talk about it, because I just couldn't let it go. I just kept pulling me back in. So was it physical rain on earth? Maybe. Was it purely spiritual, trickling down from heaven? Maybe. But what we do know is there was a time where people were in so much peace with so much inspiration that they built something beautiful that lasted, and we need to explain that. And that's it.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like when he's talking about this generation, you've got to look at it in context, because the actual context there is, so this is the thing, it's always about context, and I'll give you an example. So one of the most misquoted verses or misunderstood verses in the Bible is John 3:16, where for God so loved the world, that basically whoever believes on his son won't perish, they'll be given everlasting life. That's obviously paraphrasing it.
Yeah.
Now, the point of that verse is, so people think, oh, well, yeah, that means like, as in the non-elect or whatever, they're all going to be saved. Well, what actually it means is that it's guaranteeing that if you do believe, you will be saved. It's not a case of, well, some who believe might be saved and some won't. The point is you will. So that's the context, and and the thing with when it talks about this generation and people are saying he means that generation there. Well, actually, if you read it again, right, and you read the context, the actual generation he's speaking of is the generation that is seeing all them signs that he's speaking of. And that's the generation which won't pass away until he comes. But it's the one that sees all those signs. And the thing is with Revelation is it's like it's not a linear thing. Chapter 1 to 20, the end is this. Chapter 19 and 20 almost disjointed. But what I would say is the different camera angles, because Christ is returning in 19. But then it talks about, obviously, this millennium talks about Satan being bound and things like that. And, look, like you, I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. I'm going off what I know about the scriptures, about Revelation and how symbolic it is, how the millennial, when it talks, it's the only place that talks about a millennial reign. The 1,000 years everywhere else is always symbolic. It's symbolic of immensity, fullness, quantity, multitude. That's what it means. It's never literal.
Yeah.
So why should we take it literal in this? But there is these buildings, like you've said, 100% with you. We've been lied to. This Dark Ages is nonsense. It's utter nonsense. We've got Scaligerian history, Roman Catholic. He wrote the history. Yeah, it's fake. It's absolutely, certainly everything in the last 100 years is 100% lies we've been told. The further you go, sorry, I'd probably say in the last 100 years, maybe 5%, but you go beyond that, and it's just all lies. It's absolutely fabricated. But it's a difficult topic, and like you said, it's going to shake people, and I like to look into things and be challenged and everything, but you have got to correctly interpret the scriptures, and the scriptures interpret scriptures, and when something is difficult to understand, you interpret it with passages that are clearly understood. And like I said, this 1,000-year thing, it doesn't, as a literal number, and as this literal 1,000-year reign on earth, it doesn't fit, from my point of view and my understanding, with Luke chapter 21, Matthew chapter 24. There will be a literal reign on earth. That's clear. Christ is going to come. There's going to be a new heaven and new earth. And our place is actually, a lot of Christians talk about going to heaven, like as if we'll be floating around. No, we're going to dwell on earth in our new bodies and everything like that. I mean, for me, the 70 AD thing, yeah, obviously a lot of people say that's sort of when this happened. Is that your understanding of it? Is that generally what's sort of being said in this, amongst the different people that's talking about it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things to unpack there, and I'll get to the 70 AD thing. Obviously, we're talking about the Matthew 24, verse 34. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass, these things be fulfilled. And yes, that is the passage most people focus on when talking about this idea. And this is the one where you could talk about the word generation and what that really means. Some people say it actually means a race of people. Come from like the root of genus and things like this, and it's not necessarily a generation quite literally. And yeah, there's much interpretation that can be put into there, and you can much exegesis and hermeneutics you could apply to it, to extrapolate whatever meaning you want from that. You're saying let Scripture interpret Scripture in that respect, or let it put it into context. Well, that one could be up for interpretation, but then when you start to actually look at other passages surrounding these talks, there's some things you can't then just say, well, that's up for interpretation. For example, Matthew 16:28, there'll be some standing here, which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The only interpretation I could imagine there is, well, he's talking about when he resurrects after he gets killed on the cross, and 3 days later, that's what he was talking about. But coming in his kingdom isn't necessarily the same as resurrecting from the dead, So maybe you could reinterpret that in some way. But to say standing here doesn't mean standing there during that time. Mark 9, verse 1, he says, and he said unto them, verily I say unto you, there'll be some of them that stand here which shall not taste death till they see the kingdom of God come with power. So another camera angle on the same event, and the kingdom of God coming with power. I don't think that's just talking about Jesus alone being resurrected, although that is a powerful, brilliant, incredible thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to put that down. But I feel like he's hinting at more, the kingdom of God, which he has come to be the representative of. I think that's what he was really talking about. Luke 9:27, but I tell you of a truth, there shall be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the kingdom of God. That's pretty clear then in Luke 29. It's clarification. He's talking about the kingdom. He's talking about the heavenly kingdom, not himself being resurrected. So if you want to go in context and interpret Scripture, I think that becomes pretty clear. He's telling that there are some people standing right in front of him which will not die before the kingdom of God is revealed to them. So this is again the second coming. So I don't know. Again, people like to focus on Matthew 24 specifically and argue about what does generation mean, but then you still look at other passages. There's more than just that to back this idea up. Matthew 10:23. And when they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over all the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. Israel's not a big geographical location. There aren't that many cities to flee to. It wouldn't have taken them that long before he returned. And he's saying, you will not get through them all before I return. And you can't really apply that today because what we call Israel today didn't exist until the 40s for a long time. The letters to the 7 churches, they're all destroyed now. They're not there. How can any of that prophecy that Paul was talking about still apply to us today if those churches aren't even here anymore? Romans 13:11 through 13. And that knowing the time, that now it is high time to wake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. This is Paul, pretty imminent with his language. This is happening now. It's coming. It's right around the corner. It's not 2,000 years from now. And people like to think Paul was talking to them. But his audience relevancy, you have to think about who he was writing those letters to during that specific time. Not then read into it that he was talking about, well, he must be talking about me now. I don't think that's the wrong way to interpret these things. 1 Peter verse 4:7. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer. So even Peter was adamant, it's now. It's coming right now. Be ready, Then you have obviously Matthew 24 and 23. He says the same thing, all these things shall come upon this generation. This generation, not that generation. But you could interpret it as, well, like I said, the generation that will see the signs is what he's talking about. But in context of all these other immediacy verses with the language, I'm starting to think that interpretation is getting less and less credence now. Luke 21, 22. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written be fulfilled. These be the days which all things that are written are going to be fulfilled. Luke was adamant, it's happening in my time. I'm going to see it, Matthew 26 is where he has that conversation with Caiaphas, where he's saying, you'll see me coming in the clouds of heaven. You know, Jesus is telling him clearly, and that's when he got angry and said, "Execute him." You know, at the thought of saying that you're saying you are the Son of Man. You know, you are the Son of God. Revelation, you know, you can say it's highly interpretive, but we are to believe this is the revelation of Jesus to John, right? While he was in prison. So, although it may be symbolic, as Christians, we are to believe that this is Jesus telling John through symbolic language, maybe, what's about to happen. And the first words in Revelation 1:1, it says, "These are the things which must shortly come to pass." When was it written? When was John in prison? Well, we're told it's around about the 90s, 90 AD roughly. It may have been earlier. We don't actually know necessarily. People have inferred based on who he was referring to and who the Kaiser would have been at the time, but it could have been written before 70 AD or after, but it's more likely written before 70 AD if we are to account that the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. And he says, "These things which must shortly come to pass." Revelations 1:3, "The time is at hand." Revelations 1:7, "Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him." I can't see any other way of reinterpreting that unless you want to get all metaphysical and say, in a way, we all kind of still pierce Jesus today, right? But I don't think that's really what's going on. I think it's saying those people who stuck spears in his chest under his ribs will see him come back. That's pretty damn immediate. That's not 2,000 years in the future. And there you go. There's just some passages there that talk about the immediacy of the time, and when the people who wrote these things in context believed what was going to happen. Were they all wrong? Did they receive wrong revelation from God? Were they false prophets? I mean, if you think about it, how possibly could Christianity have become all-encompassing as it did, especially during the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages as they're called, if none of it did come to pass, and if Jesus was made out to be a liar to those very people he promised he would come back to? And so again, this isn't all hinged on just one simple verse, and this isn't hinged on, like I said, some kind of counter-Reformation movement in the 1600s to try and keep the papacy controlled over people, to convince them. It's nothing like that. This is the words of, I'm going off the words in the book and the words of Jesus himself to say there's something to this. And why are we so special that we you get to be the ones that maybe don't live during the little season? Why do we think ourselves so special that we get to live during the millennial reign, or the time where the devil's bound away for 1,000 years? If we were in the little season, how would we know? Do you think we would know? Or do you think the devil would have done everything he can to bury it and to make sure we are convinced of the wrong time? You want to talk about context? Put yourself in that context and just think for a second. Especially I assume your audience are conspiracy theorists as well, so this shouldn't be out of the bounds of speculation to imagine that we've been lied to this level. And all I would say is, fundamentally, this is about Jesus and trying to understand him and his kingdom. I'm not trying to destroy people's blessed hope, as people have told me, in some way, or lead them away, or make them think they've been left behind, or something like that. This isn't like that. The gospel doesn't change. You believe on him and you'll be saved. The good news is still the good news, okay? Just because you didn't get to reign for 1,000 years as kings with him does not mean you are somehow lesser or missed out on anything. If anything, you get to see the end of the show. Perhaps you're living in the most important time, if this is the little season, where we... Think about this. It would have been easy for those that lived during the millennial reign to believe. No faith would have been required. They didn't have to walk in faith. They knew. They saw him. And I'm pretty sure it was clear, blessed are those who believe but don't see. Don't see but still believe. And that's us. We're that generation, I suppose, who has to walk truly in faith. Because there's things we don't see or haven't seen. It was easy for the disciples to believe when they saw Jesus resurrected from the dead. That's easy enough for them to believe, isn't it? But for us, it takes more. Our faith is only stronger. And I see all this more as evidence that he told the truth. He meant what he said, and he fulfilled his promise to those people. That's an amazing thing in my eyes. So this is not a faith shaker for me, personally, but I understand for a lot of people who are in futurist, dispensationalist doctrine and worldviews, what they have predominantly been taught through all their churches, who, by the way, really don't want to talk about this subject, and... I think we need to start separating ourselves a little bit from churchianity and start trying to understand what it means to have a relationship with Jesus, you know, not our pastors and not what they tell us in a way. And maybe it's easier for me to say these things and to consider these things because I wasn't raised in a church, perhaps, you know, but I'll stop there. I'll let you go.
See, my understanding of when he talks about coming in his kingdom and basically, you know, there'll be some here that don't see death until I come in my kingdom. He's referring there because immediately after that, it goes into talking about when he was transfigured on the mount, which is like a specimen of him coming in his kingdom because he was transformed pretty much in all his glory before them. And Moses and Elijah came, who represent the law and the prophets. And that's how I understand that. So he's not saying, you know, I'm coming straight away. And the thing is with time, I mean, you know, we are looking at it and going, well, clearly he must have meant he's coming back straight away. Well, not necessarily, because I mean, the Bible obviously tells us that a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years like a day to God. And obviously he said, you know, the Lord said, no one knows the hour, not the Son, but the Father only. And you know, in the grand scheme of things, in light of eternity, 2,000 years is just a drop in the ocean, and that is quickly. So it's how we interpret sort of time. I mean, to us, yeah, like 2,000 years is a long time. Like, we have short lives. We might live 70, 80 years. And, you know, to us, it's like, well, he must have meant he's coming back in a few years because of how we interpret time and how, you know, we live such short lives now.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't take that as being that he's saying that he's coming back straight away. Because like I said, 2,000 years, 3,000 years even is nothing in the light of eternity. I mean, like I said previously, I don't see a reason why we couldn't be in the little season. And like you said, would we know? Like, well, would we know because of the deception? And like, I can see, I was reading a couple of days ago from an millennialist perspective, which is mine, and they even come to the conclusion and said, look, we could be in this little season. Like, you know, we don't believe in a literal millennium, but we could be in the little season because let's face it, I mean, Satan's deceiving the world right now. I mean, the way I look at it is, it's like when it talks about him being bound and everything. I look at it like this. So you've got a guy in prison who's a boss of like a big gang, yeah, but he's still pulling the strings, but he's bound. He's in prison, but his reach is restricted because he's not out on the streets. And that's how I see it with Satan, because we know that he can't do what he wants. He can, and that's clear from Job, when obviously, you know, he comes before the Lord and the Lord says to him, have you considered my servant Job, and all that type of stuff. So we know he is bound. He's always bound, actually. He's actually always bound, but to what degree? And I think we're starting to see, like over here in the UK, you know, that he's being let off his leash a lot more now. He's like a scrapyard dog, and his leash was short when the gospel was being preached up and down, and we had a wonderful reformation, and you know, we had the scriptures interpreted into our language. But then that chain, now it's getting longer and longer, and he's getting more free reign. So he has been bound, but I can definitely see that it is a possibility, a very, very realistic possibility, that we are in Satan's little season now. I mean, the signs are there for me.
Yeah, I mean, the amillennialist view is quite an interesting one, you know, because it does say that when after Christ's resurrection and ascension, it's been a heavenly kingdom since then, in a sense, and his reign has been going on since that time, you know, forever and ever. And there's maybe something to that. It's very similar to what I'm saying, you know, and there may have been more of a time where that had more of an impact on the people during the initial stages after his death and resurrection, where people did build an amazing world out of that belief and love. Because don't forget, Christendom just spread like wildfire during those early periods of medieval history. And you have to wonder why. and it wasn't just because like people like to make out of wars and all these type of things. No, pagans were converting because they saw the power in it. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like, oh, they subjugated me and forced me to believe. They were willingly giving up their old gods for this new god. They were like, forget that. Like this is where the power is. I want to be a part of this. You know, and you can see the beauty that was built during these times where people were that inspired because of this, and the empires that rose based on Christendom throughout this time period. So, but then it could be, like you said, there's been a time where people have started to kind of get a bit of amnesia, and Satan has crept back in slowly, and what that peak is now going into a decay mode as people are getting further and further away from God and that understanding of that he's ruling from heaven, you know, getting less connected to him through that means. So it could be, as you're saying, you know, and I don't have the answer to say exactly how it was going, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is I don't think the futurist doctrine that tribulation's about to come upon us holds much water anymore. I'm thinking something else is going on here, and let's look at this in context of, let's say, the conspiracy. There's always a mark of the beast every 10 years or so. There's always a new contender. Everyone thought it was barcodes years ago, you know, and then I don't know, it was RFID chips, you know, it was contactless payment or something like that. Now people say it's Neuralink, or the chip in your hand, or the chip in your forehead, or whatever, but it's always changing. Then people say, no, the mark of the beast is transhumanism. Oh, no, the mark of the beast was the jab, you know. It's kind of, everyone's always shifting what the mark could be. And do you know why? Because they're always showing signs and symbols around these things in the media that make people believe it's quite obviously the mark. Look, it's got 666 encoded into it. And it's kind of like, do you think it's a coincidence that all of them have this encoding put into them? Or do you think maybe you're being played a little bit here because they know you're looking for that kind of stuff? I'm starting to see that that's what's really, I think that's what's really going on here. I think we are being played. We, as conspiracy theorists and these channels online, we believe we're exposing the Illuminati. We're exposing the signs and symbols. And, you know, and it's all this is doing is proving during a mass awakening of people that Christ is about to return and we're about to go into tribulation. All the signs and symbols are there. And it's like, it's a wicked generation that seeks after a sign. Jesus made that clear himself. And that's all we do. And I'm thinking it's because the signs we're being given are not from God. They're purposely encoding these things with all the 666 in the gematria because they know people are going to look for it, so they can feel comfortable and certain that they're in that time where Jesus is about to return. I think it's a huge, convoluted, long con orchestrated by the agents of Satan during his little season, the secret societies who control everything, his foot soldiers in the physical realm who work for him, you know. So that's another take on all this that kind of points to the idea that it could be the little season, you know, this could be it. And never mind the idea as well that, you know, isn't it funny we call them the Dark Ages, and we call the period after that the Enlightenment period. And what does the devil like to do but switch good for bad and bad for good? Could it be that we're in the Dark Ages now, and that was the Enlightenment period truly when Christ first established his kingdom after his death and resurrection? And we're coming out of that now, and you have this symbolic stuff about the Statue of Liberty. You know, it's quite literally Lucifer, the Lightbringer, with the torch, or Prometheus, you know, or many ones, Apollo, whichever sun god you want to choose, or whichever bringer of knowledge you want to choose, with this feminine face wearing this toga. But then you look at the ankle, and it's a chain broken around the foot, you know. And it's kind of like, is that not symbolic of the devil being let loose from his prison? You know, is that kind of quite literally there encoded into everything? And it's kind of these subtle hints everywhere, which we kind of never really thought about much. It's like, oh, look, that's just a statue. That's clearly just a Lucifer symbol. Well, let's look closer at it. What does it mean to have its chain broken on its ankle like that? It's free. It's running free then. And so, do we have any biblical context for this? Well, we know there's a time where he's bound in chains for 1,000 years, or however long that is, and then is set free. Is loosed. Symbolically speaking, that adds up, you know. And then again, that's just one example. We've been on my channel. I've got a lot of videos looking into this. People have been doing a lot more work than I have to get into these minutiae details. But there's hints. They've left hints everywhere that this is the case, you know. But the main con is it seems the whole point of the conspiracy is to make us believe tribulation's about to happen. That seems to be the real conspiracy, to make people believe that. Because as long as you're believing that's always around the corner, they've got you. Because sadly, you know, most Christians fear that. They're not actually looking forward to it. They're not happy about that. They're living in constant fear that tribulation's about to come upon them, because it's gonna. And then they have that idea that some people get to be taken up and raptured. So a lot of people are banking on this side of it. Even that ideology didn't exist till the 1800s. It's kind of. And again, that would coincide with when a little season began. When all these odd futurist doctrine, preterist doctrine, this dispensationalism, all these things only started to appear in what you could call a little season time period, and it all starts to coalesce into this deceptive time where you say it yourself, and you've got to be blind to not think that the devil is running loose right now, influencing people. And a lot of people argue with me, this is not the new heaven and earth, you must be wrong. And I'm saying, of course it's not the new heaven and earth. That doesn't come until after the little season. And your Bible tells you that. So why do you believe when Christ returns after tribulation, then a new heaven and earth is established? It doesn't say that. But why do people believe that? It's because it's what they've been taught in churches. So then you have to start questioning the validity of what they're being taught in churches as well. And the devil could easily get into these places too. And we have to be careful, and I think it comes back to us as individuals to really go back to the word ourselves and read it for ourselves and have these discussions to try and just hash it out and not look to authoritative men for the answers and think we're too stupid to figure it out for ourselves. And when you start scrutinizing it, you realize these narratives are falling apart. And sadly, money's involved. People, there's agendas to make people tell you that tribulation's about to happen at any moment. It's profitable to keep people in fear. Why is the church any more? Why are they not susceptible to the same kind of what's the word? Love of money. Men get corrupted. I think a lot of people need to remember that. And so there you go. There's another answer to it. Very long-winded to what you said, but there we go.
I can totally listen. I can totally believe that we're being played, because what people need to understand is they underestimate the devil. He has been around for thousands of years. He would steamroll us individually in an instant should Christ take his hand off him. It would be over. We're no match for him at all, in any way at all. He's far cleverer than we are. He's far more powerful. He has far more knowledge. And the key word that people need to, and this is one word that rings in my ears all the time from Genesis chapter 3, he is subtle. Subtle. And when people are looking to this mark of the beast, like you said, it's this RFID chip or whatever, it's this, it's that, it's the other. That is taking you down a path and distracting you. And the people are getting sucked into these things. And that is a deception in and of itself, because what matters is, are you right with God? You might be great at identifying all these signs and symbols of this, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, this organization, that organization. But what does that matter if you're not right with God? And the devil will keep people busy. He's got something for everybody, whatever it is, whether it's this, we're looking into this. Maybe this is something, we should be thinking, well, hang on a minute. But what I say is this, and I've said it a few times on here, when we go down these rabbit holes, we can be sucked in. We need to be really careful. I look into all kinds of things. But the first thing is, we need to be in the Word. We need to be praying. We need to be in the Word. Number one, before anything, that's what I do. People need to understand that. And secondly, spend some time with your families as well. Spend some time, if you've got kids, wife, whatever, spend some time with your family, because this it can consume you, and I know it can. And we need to be really, really careful. And I think we're in a really dangerous time. Like I've said, this little season thing, I could fully see how we could be in it. And I definitely wouldn't be telling people, oh, no, we're definitely not in it, because I can't say that. There's a lot of things that don't add up. And that's why I wanted to talk to you on here, because obviously, you know, we can bounce ideas off each other. And like you said, you're getting people on your channel who have maybe different perspectives. And like I've mentioned to you, I don't believe in a literal millennial reign, but that doesn't mean that there's no Satan's little season. There is going to be a little season. Are we in it? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like the architecture, what we've talked about, that is perplexing. Like you talked about time, the time it would take. Like one of the buildings, I think off the top of my head, that York Minster in York. I mean, you look at that thing, and I stopped at the hotel directly facing it a number of years ago, and I remember going out looking at it, and you're looking at this thing, and you're thinking, they did not just use hammer and chisels on this thing. They weren't on horse and carts. Like, what is actually going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the answers, but certainly, I mean, I've often thought that, well, they were definitely more advanced than what we give them credit for, and actually probably far cleverer and far stronger than we are now. Like, I'm sure that, you know, when people, you just walk around and some of the things that people have to be told not to do in this day and age, you think there's no way we're the most advanced. Like, just no way.
No, even morally, like never mind
Yeah.
physically, morally they had higher standards than we did, way higher. You know, and
Yeah.
honor. They had concepts like honor still existed. The culture was completely revolving around God. You know, fundamentally, these people were inspired to create those things. And York Minster, I went there a couple of years ago with my wife and son, and I've sat next to it, the cafe just behind the cobble street on the back of it, you know, drinking coffee,
Yeah.
and looking at this thing. And I've been in there, you know, it's a marvel. It's you cannot help but be changed by being in the presence of that thing. Like perspective is just suddenly given to you, you know, when you look at the intricate details and the perfection of this structure. You know, it speaks to it inspires the soul. And I believe that's the type of thing only inspired people can create. You know, people who actually love God and are being inspired by God could create something that close to a glimpse of what it means to be in heaven. You know, I think that's what they were striving for. Of course, it pales into insignificance compared to the real thing and what is to come in the new heaven and earth, you know. But I think people, Minster was, Lincoln Cathedral's a hell of a one as well. That's incredible too, and I've seen both, you know. And I suppose I studied next to Lincoln Cathedral, so maybe these are things that inspired me to always have these thoughts, because when you're in the presence of these buildings, it's kind of, who built this is all you can think. And it wasn't a bunch of slaves or people who, you know, it wasn't what they told us. No chance. And I'm not saying we couldn't build them today. That's another claim a lot of people think I'm making. Yeah, we can. There's a building in Dresden, a cathedral in Dresden, that was fully restored after it got bombed in World War II. Only got finished in like 2018, I think. But you can watch the construction of it. And yeah, it's a very good replica of the real thing. Very, very close. Like, pretty good. But the machines they used to build it were not what those people were using who built it originally. We're using cranes. Massive structural cranes and like dump trucks and steamrollers and diggers and all sorts of things, you know, and transport systems and weight pulley mechanisms that they didn't have. So how did they do it? That's the question you should be asking yourself. And it took us a long time to reconstruct it, you know, because the people had to put details into stone they never normally bothered to do today. You know, it's a lost art, it's a lost skill. There aren't that many people who can do it, you know, and you've got to find the resources and the people and the time and the money to get it, make all that happen. Where did those people in the past have all those things? Was everyone just a stonemason? Did everyone know how to build cathedrals? You know, it's odd, isn't it, when you really start to think about it? The population was far less then, right? Like, they had less. They didn't have as much. Like, there's no. Where did they gain the knowledge to do these things? It boggles the mind, you know. But if they're inspired by the Son of God reigning from heaven, that might explain a thing or two. might put a bit of perspective into it. But again, I know I'm rambling here, but I don't have all the answers. But this is something I do say a lot, like you were saying. Yeah, don't get lost in these things. It's not fun, and I don't like using this phrase. Like people, it's not a salvation issue fundamentally. Okay, get right with Jesus. Get right with God. Learn the gospel. Read books. Stay in the Word. Okay, get covered. by the blood of the Lamb. Be ready for that final judgment. That's all that counts. That's all that really matters. You know, this is detail. This is just petty details, and it's interesting, yes. But don't lose your entire personality and life to these things, and be humble that, yes, you could be wrong. And, you know, I'm in the conspiracy game. I've been proven wrong thousands of times about many things. I've had many theories that have shown to be complete nonsense. I don't make predictions anymore for that reason, because you just don't, you just don't know, you know. And so I'm there with you, and I say, you know, go spend time with your family, make your immediate surroundings beautiful, do what God intended you to do with your life. It probably wasn't obsess over a random topic on conspiracy. Probably not what he had in store for you. Live your life. Don't let it be wasted. I agree with you, and it's actually a big part of my channel. Actually, is about coping with learning the truth and having healthy coping mechanisms to not become a raving lunatic who ends up losing everything all around them, which is very easy to do as a conspiracy theorist. We know that it's easy to get passionate about stuff, start running your mouth, and then you realize it's 2 hours later. That person sat next to you hasn't said a single word, and you know they hate you a little bit more by the end of it. You know, it's happened to all of us. And I give advice to help people not do that as well. So I think you understand that from what you just said there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, listen, as a Christian, your circle gets smaller. You know, like I said, 23 years ago, I became a Christian. Quickly, your circle of friends gets very much smaller because they think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And then when you're a Christian conspiracy theorist, wow, it's even smaller still, because people in the church are like, wow, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm quite fortunate. I have some people who are on a similar wavelength to me. But you know, it is a small circle. It can become quite lonely, and this is one of the good things about doing a podcast. You get to speak to like-minded people like yourself, and like you said, you have different people on, and it is important, like you said, get into the word. It's a really interesting topic. I mean, we could talk about all kinds of aspects. I mean, you know, like you said about, we've got these cranes now, we've got earth movers, we've got this, we've got that, and it still took all these years to restore that building in Dresden, but they didn't have any of them things. So clearly what we're told, you know, it's a lie. And I'm quite happy to say that I don't know certain things. Like, I know less than I know. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot I don't know, a lot of stuff I don't know, and very little I do know. You know, what I do know is that Jesus Christ, he's the only way to heaven, and putting your faith in him. I do know that. That's one thing I do know, and that's the most important thing. You mentioned it. Don't get lost, guys, in these things. It is a fascinating topic. You know, I love talking about all different types of stuff. As you do as well, Paul, like you've said. It's been great. I could talk to you all night. I'd love to get you back on to talk about the Nephilim. That sounds extremely interesting. So I'd love to talk to you about that. But before we sort of wrap this one up, can you just tell people then, let them know about your channel, and also maybe what sort of new projects you've got on the horizon, and also where they can get your book?
Sure, yeah. So my channel is called Understanding Conspiracy. Just type it in, you'll find me. I have the book The Nephilim Look Like Clowns available on Kindle, hardback, and paperback. You can get that on Amazon. So go there to get the book. There's a whole 44 episode series dedicated to that topic on my channel as well. I started it in 2016, so you can kind of see the whole progression of that up to today. I have many playlists on my channel dedicated to many topics, all conspiracy related. There is one for this specific topic we talked about today, the Millennial Kingdom. There's quite a lot of videos in there now. You can also go to my collaborations section, and you'll find me talking to a lot of different channels about a lot of different topics, not just this topic, all sorts of things. Okay, so go check that out as well. Spiritual warfare is another thing I love to get into, again, about how to deal with demons, basically, and that's a lot about what this work is really about. It's about understanding the enemy, knowing what they look like is a crucial role in actually understanding what you're dealing with, and that's primarily what that work is about. So YouTube's the place to find me, and I am on other channels like Rumble and Odyssey, and you can find me on Instagram as well and Twitter, but my social media game is abysmal. My wife hates me for it. I'm really bad at it. I'm on YouTube primarily, and I do need to up my game in all the other ones, the other platforms. So you can, wherever you find me, subscribe. Maybe one day I'll pick up these other places and actually roll with them. But that's it. YouTube's the place to find me. Yeah.
No, I'm same as you with social media. My social media game's abysmal. But yeah, it's been a fascinating topic to talk to you about, Paul. I just hope, guys, that it hasn't triggered you too much. Maybe I've said some things that you don't agree with, and maybe Paul said some things, but we're just trying to hash things out. We're just talking about this topic. So I don't want anyone to get sort of angry, sending in angry emails or whatever. We're just talking about things. People are different. We have different perspectives. God creates people differently. We're all unique. And this is what it's all about, just getting our heads together and saying, what if, what if we're in this little season? So
Yeah.
thanks again, Paul. Guys, I'll be back next week with a new guest, and I'm Paul, and this is Beyond the Paradigm.
I want you to get together.